moral relativism. It's such an important topic, such an important concept. I know some professors who refuse to teach on this. I'll tell you why in a minute, but I find it is so very, very, very important. Now, normally when I teach, I'm very fair. I'm biased, but I'm fair in this sense. I'm biased in the sense that I have a preferenced theory that I'll put forth, but I'm also fair. So I'll show you the pros and cons of each theory, whether I'm against it or for it, right? Even the one that I prefer, when we're going through, say, ethical theories, I will go through all the ethical theories and I will prefer one over all the others, say virtue ethics, but I will still be fair. I will still give all the arguments for and all the arguments against, and I'll let you be the judge of it. Now, that's normally how I do the entire class, no matter what class it is. This is the one exception. This theory. It's actually not an ethical theory, it's a meta-ethical theory, but it's called moral relativism. This is the only theory all semester, no matter what class you take with me, if we're covering this, I am not fair. I will tell you straight up that it's a bad theory to hold. It is by far one of the worst theories that you could ever endorse. All right. Now, don't take my word for it. We are going to look at what the theory is. We'll look at some positives, the few positive in its favor, and then we'll look at some objections. There are actually quite a few. I've got 6 on one handout and another 10 on another. We won't cover them all, but it's quite a lot. But at the end of the day, just like I do in class, I'm not just going to require students, for example, just to repeat back to me that this is the right theory. No. You are a independent rational agent. You're going to have to make the choice and look at the evidence for yourself. Do you think it's a good theory? Or do you think it's not? Right? So what is moral relativism? Moral relativism is the idea that, you do you, I do me, we agree to disagree. Let's all get along. That's right for me, that's right for you, or wrong for you. And we just, morally speaking, so this already sounds super duper familiar. We're just characterizing it at this point. We're not defining it. We'll define it in a minute. But that should sound extremely familiar to you because it's so pervasive in our culture. And that's the big reason why I still like to cover it in my classes. Other professors, they don't like to cover it because, well, it's such a bad view. It fails on so many conceptual and theoretical grounds. And so it's just not worth spending time on. I have a difference of opinion. I think it's still worth spending time on because it's so ingrained in us, so familiar to us. We rely on it every day, despite the fact that it's a really bad view. So now I have a handout here that I want to share with you, something I drew up. And we're going to start not with relativism, we'll start with moral objectivism, right? So this is our alternative option, moral objectivism. Now, and this is just a broad view. So I, for example, would be a moral objectivist. There it is. I'm revealing my hand. I am a moral objectivist. What does that mean? Well, you read here, moral objectivist. To be a moral objectivist means that moral truths exist independent of anyone's opinions. You might also hear it be said, morality is mind independent. Moral facts are similar to physical facts, and that what the facts are do not depend on what anyone thinks about them. Now, this is a key difference between moral objectivism, which views morality as kind of like the physical facts of the universe, like the laws of physics. They are there, whether you like them or not. Whereas moral relativism views it more as like a matter of taste, okay? Let's keep going. Similar to the physical facts, there is a truth of the matter whether X is morally right or wrong, even though I might or might not know the truth of that matter. It's up to us to discover what's right and wrong, not invent an answer just as we discover physical facts about the world. And don't just invent whatever seems nice to us. Now, backing up, there is a truth of the matter. Objectivists think that even if we can't discover, because it is about discovery, it's not about making up the morality, it's not socially constructed, as they say. Even if we can't figure out what the morally right, correct answer is, it's up to us to try to figure that out. And we may never do that. And that's where a lot of disagreement comes about, is because people disagree about what the discovery is. It's almost like in laws of physics, except we've gotten pretty good nowadays with discovering what the physical laws are and should be. Not as obvious what the moral laws are and should be sometimes, especially, some are very obvious, say like, don't punch babies in the face, right? Don't torture animals, right? Don't murder, and so on. So those are really, really obvious cases, and an objectivist would point to those like, yes, we have moral intuitions, real strong moral intuitions. We know that those things are wrong, and but there's some gray areas. There's some areas where we are not really sure. There is an answer, but it's hard to get. Now, this is going back to the difference between metaphysics and epistemology. Metaphysics is what is the case. Epistemology is whether I can know whether it's the case. And what the objectivist is saying is that there is indeed an answer. There's a truth of the matter about whether something is morally right or wrong, but we may not ever find out that truth. Just like, think about how many numbers of stars are in the universe at any given time. And assuming the universe is a finite thing, the number of stars in the universe will be either even or odd, but we're never possibly going to know which one it is. So, that is moral objectivism. Now, that is my view. I think that's the correct view, but we still need to tease this a little bit apart. This is not the same as moral absolutism. This is what we see next on the handout. Moral absolutism is a stronger version of moral objectivism. That is, one can be a moral objectivist without being a moral absolutist. Okay? So let's look at an example. An absolutist, for example, is somebody who just holds that a moral law holds absolutely in every case. So if you look at this red underlined part, you can see, consider the statement, lying is wronged. If a moral absolutist says this is what he means, that there are never any exceptions under any circumstances, even in the classic case of whether you're lying to the Nazis that you're hiding Jews, that would still be wrong to do that. Lying is always everywhere and for everyone just plain wrong. This is a moral prohibition that holds lying is wrong all the time, everywhere. There are no exceptions. Now, you can be an objectivist without being that strong. Okay, so look at just below this. You can be an objectivist who's not an absolutist, and when they say lying is wrong, there might be exceptions. Well, how's it still objective? It's objective in the sense that it applies regardless of anyone's personal opinion. Remember, we said it's mind independent. It doesn't just depend on how you feel that day. It depends on, well, in this case, the circumstances. It's set by the situation. So, objective, and it applies regardless of anyone's personal opinion, but it's not necessarily absolute. Just like some laws of physics might have exceptions or limits to their application. But notice that in those exceptions or limits in their application, that is dictated by the circumstances or the situation, right? So it's not going to be like, well, I feel like gravity shouldn't operate this way. That's just to me how it is. No, like it's, well, if the circumstances are such and such and such, then gravity will operate differently. Let's say, I don't know anything about gravity, but let's just assume. On the moral case, how does this apply? Well, you could say that lying is wrong in general, but you could hold that there are certain exceptions such that it's not morally wrong because there are overriding circumstances. Or you might say that abortion is wronged in general, but you might think that there are exceptions such as, and this is a common view, such as when the life of the mother is in jeopardy, or in cases of rape and incest, let's say. Those, but again, notice those are situations that determine the exceptions. There's the circumstances that change that determine the situation. And that is what determines the exception. So it's not like, I feel like it's okay for me now. No. That would be more relativistic. But if you're saying that in general this law holds, but then situations sometimes change circumstance, you are an objectivist. Now, what about moral relativism? Moving down, there are two general types. Very quickly, there are individual and there's cultural. Now, you might think, oh, well, subjectivism, which is also aka individual moral relativism, that is what contrasts usually with objectivism, objective, subjective, right? But that's, I don't know why they did this terminologically, but they just did it. So you could think of those as contrasts, but in fact, there are two versions of moral relativism, the individual and the cultural. And really what determines those is that in the individual stripe, morality is relative to each individual person. And in the cultural stripe, morality is going to be relative to the culture, right? They are both versions of moral relativism. Now, what makes X right or wrong in those cases just is the beliefs, attitudes, etc. of individuals or groups. It's not going to be external or independent. But why do we use this term relative to? Relativism, relative, relation, right? Like you have a relative. That appeals, relativism appeals to a relation. So I like to use this example. Derek McAllister is tall. I'm 6'2". That's kind of tall, I suppose, but that's a relative statement. Now, not all relative statements are bad and dirty. Like relative statements are completely legitimate in some cases, and this is one of them, right? Whether that statement is true is going to be dependent upon the context. It's true if I'm standing next to Peter Dinklage, right, the guy who plays Tyrion Lannister. It's going to be false if I'm standing next to Shaquille O'Neal or Gronk or a room of NBA locker players. That is how some statements and cases describing reality work. They are sometimes relative. The question is not whether that's a bad thing. That's totally legitimate. The question is whether ethics or morality is like that. Is ethics like that? Right? And moving on, I say, obviously some things are relative or subjective in this way. For example, matters of taste. Pralines and cream is the best flavor of ice cream, for example. I don't know who would say this, but let's imagine that somebody holds this view. I would think it's something like triple dark fudge chunk chocolate with throw in some coffee, throw in some Reese's peanut butter in there, and that now we're talking, right? That would be mine. But that would be the best, right? But that's subjective. That's according to me, right? This Latin disputibus non disputandum, we cannot dispute about tastes. Some things are matters of taste. And how is that a relative thing? Because it is relative to me, this is the best. Now, we could fight over taste, but if we did, it would essentially be over who gets to have the flavor they want, and the biggest person might win. But there's no true argument in the sense of trying to find out and discover the truth of the matter. In these cases, there is no real, true, best ice cream flavor, unfortunately. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, well, what if I see, I don't know, a newspaper headline where they did a study and they show strawberry. Report, strawberry is the best flavor of ice cream in the country. Would that contradict what we've said here, that there is no best flavor, no such best flavor? No, that would not. Because what they're saying in that case is not that, hey, strawberry flavor has these objective features, wouldn't make it objectively the best, and we all can recognize that. We know it's the best, and everything else just pales in comparison. Maybe you think that, but that would not be an objective thing. It's not the claim being made. What's made in the headline, it sounds like that, but in the headline, it really is just a translation of, we polled a bunch of people and asked them subjectively what their feeling was on strawberry. And most of those people objectively reported their subjective tastes. And so, or it could be that, or it could be like, well, strawberry is the best selling, right? But something like that, you would have to translate. So that's, although the newspaper headline might say strawberry today ice cream, and actually there is no such objective best taste when it comes to matters of taste. Now, as we see down here, moral relativism, according to moral relativism, if we were to wrap it up in a nutshell, according to moral relativism, the truth or validity of moral judgments is relative to or dependent upon some context. There's always an assumed, if not stated, extra clause, true for me or according to my culture, right? And so that's actually why in the taste example, the best flavored ice cream, it's actually people saying, well, best for me, best for me, best for me. And you just get a whole conglomerations of just best for me. Some people think that that's how morality works, but they would be relativists. But again, we haven't looked at the problems yet. But that's how relativism works. Okay, we'll get into the objections here in a minute. But first, I want to consider the attractions of relativism, because there are some things to like about it. I think there's at least two major things to like about this, and this will become more apparent as we look at the objections, because we'll kind of unpack the view even more. Number one is that you really can't have conflict. It avoids conflict. So when I say agree to disagree, I don't have to be in contention with anybody anymore. So it's really nice. It's like a peacemaking sort of thing. Okay. So there's that. And that's really attractive. Like, I can hold a view and I can hold my views. Another attractive feature of it is that I'm always right. Because again, I'm just going with how I feel. Again, if it's just like matters of taste, I'm always right. I can't say to you, how some people have that gene marker where the taste of cilantro tastes like soap. Like, if that were you and the cilantro just tasted like soap to you, there is nothing I could try to say to convince you. Just for you, it would be true that it's not good, right? So you would always be right and correct in your estimation, right? And your flavor, your taste can change over time, but you would always be correct at whatever point when you're self-describing. So that's really nice, attractive feature as well. You can never be wrong. The first one is it's attractive because you can avoid conflict. And then it's attractive second because you can never be wrong. You're just self-reporting your views, your tastes, your preferences. Now, let's look at the objections. And I've got quite a few here. I appreciate you hanging in there, and I'll probably end up chopping this up into multiple parts and shorts and smaller segments. But if you've hung this long, I really appreciate you for supporting this project. And I really look forward to whatever comments, likes, share, subscribe. And if you like what you see here, please leave a comment and just say, hey, I look forward to being there with you next time. So take care.